And so first comment I wanted to address, and there are several of these, by the way, so I'm just going to pick a few of them that brought good points for you guys to understand. So this comment says, there are cases where Plan 3 is better than Plan 2 because the indexing benefit is unique to Plan 3. So what he's saying there is the indexing benefit exists in Plan 3, not in Plan 2. Correct. Someone starting in their early 20s that gets at least 20 years of service and can see their defined benefit close to Plan 2 plus the contribution portion. The closer to age 65 you leave service, the less impact of indexing, and Plan 2 becomes the better choice. Historically, Plan 2, you're contributing 6% of your salary to the system. So what he's saying here is someone in Plan 3 that worked for 20 years and decided to leave would be eligible to get a 3% indexing benefit. So basically every year, their pension would grow by about 3%. It's kind of like a deferral benefit. Again, it's only on Plan 3. So if you let it compound long enough, he's saying it's going to catch up to what Plan 2 would have paid out anyways. So the thing is, because Plan 2 literally pays double what Plan 3 pays, you gotta stop and think, how many years is it going to take earning 3% on a compounding basis to add up to 100% to make up the entire amount? It actually take about 23 years. So unless you're like leaving at age 42 and you got your 20 years in by then, you're not going to catch up to Plan 2 in whole. Yes, you still have the defined contribution part that would certainly help. So in weird situations like this, yeah, it's possible. I'm not saying Plan 2 works best in every case. There's always going to be some unicorn thing, and people really like to bring that up in the comments for a reason is, what about this weird scenario? This is when it wins, which is fine. But you remember, when you're listening to things on YouTube or podcasts, they're meant for general education. It's meant for like 90% of people, not the weird 1%ers, right? So there's always going to be weird situations where it does work, but for most people, that's where I'm coming from. It's what I've seen and experienced doing this for 10 years now, seeing over 1,000 different retirement plans. So this person also goes on to say, with Plan 3, if you pass early, your heirs would get your contribution, which would be substantial. Plan 2, you could choose a survivor option, which Plan 3 also has, but that really digs the monthly benefit. So again, this person's saying that Plan 3 is better because if you pass away, your heirs would get the defined contribution part. And he says Plan 2 doesn't have that. And it really depends on what you mean by early. So let's assume early means before you start collecting your pension. Or the Plan 3 pension is freebie. You don't get anything from that if you were to pass away. It's whatever you saved in your defined contribution would be inherited by next of kin. Plan 2, they don't have that same component. But what people understand with Plan 2 is you're still paying into it. You're paying a contribution rate somewhere between 6 and 8% depending on which plan you're on or what retirement system you're in. That money doesn't just sit there. You're putting that money into a pot every single month. The state does track it, and it does earn interest. Up until 2022, that interest rate was 5.5%. Now it's a little bit less than that. So it does have interest growing on it. So in the case that you were to pass away before you start collecting your benefit, your family could actually cash it out, and that money could go to your next of kin. So it's not like there's no money there. You just don't see it. It's not as obvious, but there is money there. Secondly, if that's something that you're really concerned about, they make this thing called life insurance that you could just go out and buy whatever death benefit you wanted to pass on to your next of kin. So you don't have to save it 100% like this person's trying to do in Plan 3. You can go and buy a policy and literally pay out tax-free to your beneficiary. You only have to save as much because you're leveraging your benefit. You can pay $100 a month and get, like $400,000 of coverage versus someone that scrapes and saves to build up to $400,000 on their own. And by the way, life insurance pays out tax-free where Plan 3 is not. So you don't even need to buy as much life insurance as you really think you do because it pays out tax-free to the beneficiary. All right, so in short there, index benefit definitely does help, but it's not going to add up to more than what you get from Plan 2 on a guaranteed basis unless you retire really, really early in your career. Secondly, passing away early and the whole my heirs can inherit it scenario can be solved with just simple life insurance purchase. Yes, it takes some planning and it's a know-it-all. So someone that did nothing, Plan 3 might work for them better in that regard. But any little bit of planning, you would more than likely supersede what you'd have in Plan 3 as far as what you're leaving for your heirs. All right, next one I wanted to highlight here is this comment thread right here. So I'm not going to go through it all because this is really long. If you guys want to read through it all, I'll put the link in the description so you can go and read the comment list. But I wanted to just make his first 3 comments. First point he was trying to make here, I'm going to summarize this because it's lengthy, saying that there's $1 million difference between the plan payments. So what he's saying there is, if Plan 2 really does pay twice as much as Plan 3, so like in the scenario I gave earlier, if your salary or your pension from Plan 3 is $30,000 and Plan 2 is $60,000, there's a $30,000 per year deficit. Over 30 years, that's going to add up to somewhere close to $1 million is what he's saying here. But if we assume we only live 25 years retirement, the gap is only $750,000. So again, I'm not sure what he keeps going to this gap thing means. He's just trying to say how much income I would have gotten from Plan 2 versus Plan 3. So what he's saying in his comment here is someone that collected $30,000 more than someone on plan 3 for 25 years would have banked in their pocket $750,000 more of income over that time period. So he's assuming that if someone on plan 3 just has $750,000 in their account, that's the same. That somehow $750,000 banked in your pocket over 30 years is the same as having $750,000 sitting at an investment account at the end of 30 years. And there's not the same for a few reasons. One, $750,000 in your pocket is in your pocket. $750,000 in an investment account, that ain't your money yet. You're still in the marketplace. You haven't paid any tax on that money yet. So the person that has $750,000 of income distributed to them over the past 25 years, they've been paying taxes on it the whole way at whatever effective rate has been. So they're able to spread their taxes out over a longer time period. If you have $750,000 in your account today, remember, that's not your money unless you take it. You take it, there's really no way in the current tax code for you to stay under the effective tax rate that person did when they distribute their income over 30 years. Trying to take $750,000 out in one single year to break even, you're going to shoot yourself up into a much higher tax bracket and be left with less money after taxes. Plus, you're also going to end up paying more for Medicare and things like that. So it's not quite even in this case. Now, his second point, he's assuming that someone in plan 2 would contribute over the course of their lifetime, over a 30-year period, somewhere between $150,000 to $180,000, basically $5,000 to $6,000 a month on average. So someone that's in plan 2 saving, that's 6-8%, he's assuming if you do that for 30 years, you personally put in $150,000 to $180,000 into that. And so he's saying because you personally put into that, the gap or how much, again, going back to this whole income difference here would be less because you didn't really make the $750,000 over the last 25 years because you put in $150,000 of it. So only $600,000 of it was actual what you got from the state, and the first $150,000 was just returning your principal, which I guess is one way to look at it. And then he goes on to say that everything in plan 3 is yours, but not really, because that plan 3 might just come out of thin air. You also put money there. So he totally overlooked the fact that you have to contribute money into plan 3 as well. So you'd have to subtract that too if you're going to look at this whole return of principal thing. And really, when you step back and think about it, if you really did put $150,000 to $180,000 over 30 years into a retirement account, and then every single year from that point forward, they let you take $60,000 on a guaranteed basis, how good of a deal is that? You'd be getting all your money back within 3 years. For anything after that is a pure profit. So that just, in my opinion, kind of underlines why plan 2 is so much more important and safer option than plan 3. Now, the third point, and this is the last point I'll go over of this comment thread here, he says that with investments, there's risk and the gains can be greater. So if you earn anywhere from 5 to 8%, you can have a large lump sum in the end, which is going to be enough to produce more income than you would get in plan 3. And that it continues to grow past service too, right? And that statement's true. If, the longer you invest, the more risk you take on, the more gains you're obviously going to get, right? You're rewarded for the risk that you take. But one thing we need to share for you, when we say we're averaging anywhere from 5 to 7% per year, a lot of people don't know what average is. So let's just take a look at how's the last year's do. So if we just go back and look, how'd the market do this year, 2024? This is from filming this at the end of November here, currently up 25%. Then we go back and look at the past returns. We're up 24%, minus 19, 26, 16, 28, minus 6, 19, 9, minus 0.7. Then you're up 11, up 29, up 13, yada, yada, yada. So for the most part, not one single year is ever going to return exactly 5, 6, or 7%. As you can see from the trend here, we're going to be high, 25%, 15%, or you're going to be down anywhere from 20% to 6%. So on average is how you get the 5%. So it's never a smooth line. So in order for you to average that, you need to stay invested even in retirement. And like I said, if you were retired before 2022 and you kept everything in the market, and the market literally went down 19%, and you had to say you had $1 million saved up somewhere, your $1 million turned to $800,000. If you don't have the stomach or the mindset to absorb that type of loss and you make irrational moves, that's going to cost you a lot of money. So in that regard, that's why plan 2 is nice, is you don't have to worry about this kind of market fluctuations. It's all built in, kind of out of sight, out of mind. So it's a lot less of a stressful plan to manage. Next thing to understand when you're looking at these whole rates of returns is that rates of returns often are different than what your actual rates of return are, right? So when we look at actual rate of returns, that's called CAGR, or compound annual growth rate. So if we just went from the year 2000 to the end of 2023, and you've adjusted for inflation, the average return over that time period is 4% per year. Now, annualized return, the CAGR, which basically it's assuming actual returns, is only 2.4%. Now, what does this whole average versus actual return really mean? So the easiest way I know to show people is if you assumed you had an investment where you earned 100% in a single year. So you doubled your money. So let's just say you had $10,000 that you invested somewhere and it doubled, right? You got 100% return on that money. You made $10,000. You're up 100%. Now, if the next year that investment goes down 50%, our investment from 20,000 total down to 10. So we're back to our original principle. Now, if you took 100% minus 50%, you'd be left with 50% divided by 2, right, the last 2 years. It would give you an average rate of return of 25%. So you could say, hey, I earned an average of 25%, but I still have $10,000. My average return is 0. So that's why it's important to understand the difference between actual return and average return, because average is not really what you're making. It's just mathematical ways to calculate and report things. So if you earn 5 to 6% on average, your actual is going to be less than that. So you can see on the bottom here, I'll highlight it. It just says, over the long run, the stock market has had an inflation-adjusted annualized return between 6 and 7%. So if you're assuming, anything more than that, you're probably being a little bit too optimistic. Financial plans I build for clients, I only use 5% rates of return. If you're earning more than that, great. But 5% is what I use because it's undercutting what the long-term trend is. And if it works at 5%, your plan is going to work at 6 or 7%. So it's when you build these models, and these people that comment oftentimes with their Excel spreadsheets, often using 6, 7, 8% returns because they're going off of, what the stock market's done since 1920. But you probably haven't been invested in the market since 1920. You've been invested since the 90s, the 2000s, 2010s. The rates of returns over the past couple of decades aren't the same. So it's important to take that into consideration. All right, I want to go over one more of these comments because I think it's really important for everyone to understand. He brought some good points. So in this case, I'm going to summarize the comment. He's saying that PERS 3 can actually be better than PERS 2. Big surprise. What you're not considering is the compound interest on the saving till retirement. So we'll pause right there. Do you really think someone like me, who manages money for a living, this been for 10 years, didn't factor in compound interest? I always have to laugh when I hear these type of comments. Now he's just describing basically a scenario. So he's saying that if someone at UW worked $60,000 and were to invest 7.9% in the PERS 2 contribution into Plan 3 instead, you would earn more money. So that's what he's doing with his math here. So he's saying if you contribute 7.9% of your $60,000 salary, it's $4,740 per year. If you invest in the market and let it compound for 20 years, you'd have something like $280,000. Yeah. So first thing we're going to do is math check it because he is doing some weird future value things and he might be using a spreadsheet for this. I'm just going to go over to my compound calculator here and just punch it in. So if we have 4,740 for 20 years, so I think he said 7%. It's $207,000, not $280,000. So I don't know what he's really doing here. If you got 8%, you're at $234,000. If you're 9% average, you're at $264,000. So $280,000 might be generous. Maybe I'm missing something. But anyways, even if you had that $280,000 for 20 years, the whole point I'm trying to get at is are you able to produce the same income from Plan 3 as Plan 2? So if you had 20 years in and you had $280,000, how much income does that actually mean? Right? So if you took 3% off of it, it's $8,000 per year. And if you took 5%, you'd be getting like $14,000 per year. So in other words, is that $8,000 to $14,000 of income you could potentially generate from that portfolio going to offset what you gave up by taking Plan 3 over Plan 2? And obviously it's probably not going to be, right? So if he did have $60,000, let's say it was his top 5 years, he got 20 years in, he'd get 40% of it. It's about $24,000. So he need to make up about $12,000 per year from his investment accounts. So depending if where he is in that range here. If he took 3% of $280,000, he'd be at $8,400. If he had 5%, $14,000. So he might have made it up in this case. So does that make it better? Potentially. You still took a decent amount of risk to get there. Again, if you're going to do 7.9% of your salary into contribution, and one's going to guarantee you $24,000 per year, and the other one is maybe 14, maybe 8, depending on how markets do, how much you want to take, and that kind of stuff. Like I said, it's not as steady. That's why I just say oftentimes just do Plan 2. It's a little bit safer of an option. You don't have nothing to worry about. And again, this guy, even if he did beat it, say, that's $280,000 that he has there, he can't touch that. In order to maintain that level of income, he has to maintain that principal balance and continue to draw off of it each year, which means there's more managing going on there. There's fees that have to be accounted for to pay for that, right? Whether he's doing it on his own or paying an advisor, there's fees that are incorporated into that. So even though he's going to be generating, $14,000 per year, is that net of fees and such. So there's more to it than, I think it's going to earn more money, therefore it's better. So it's always more to dive deeper. So again, not saying that Plan 2 is always better. It's just more likely. And then he made another point here, and this goes way beyond what I was trying to get at when I recorded this. And he was saying if you chose option F, which is, well, if you say 15% 7.9, think of the taxing that's going to do and how much more money you're going to have. Again, anytime you're contributing more money to something and taking on more risk, you're probably going to end up with more. That's just kind of how it works. So it's not a safe comparison to say, oh, if I put 15% in plan 3, I'm going to have more money and more income than someone in plan 2 that only had 7.9%. Of course, the person that saved more is probably going to have more money. That's just how math works. Now, he likes to get into taxes. Well, you guys know that's one of my favorite topics. He's saying if you save the extra 7%, you'd be saving an additional 30% in taxes. Now, the thing to remember that these are tax deferred accounts. Keyword, deferred. They're not tax-free accounts. They're not tax savings accounts. You're kicking the can down the road. You may feel like you're saving money today, but come later, you're going to have to pay taxes on all of your contributions plus all of the interest that it earned over that time period. So you can go ahead and stuff plan 3 as much money as you want and put in the S&P and watch the thing grow to the moon. But at the end of the day, you still owe taxes on the money, right? Just because you go to a store, give them a credit card, and they accept it, and you don't necessarily have to pay that credit card back in full, doesn't mean that it was free or you saved the money you purchased because you didn't have to pay it right then and there. Over the long run, if you don't pay back your debt, the credit card eats you an interest. Taxes are the same thing on your retirement accounts. Just because you're not owing taxes today doesn't mean you're not going to go down the road. And the amount of interest that's going to compound by not paying down that tax debt over the years is going to be quite high. All right, so that's enough about reading comments. You can see that Plan 2 and Plan 3 is a very deep discussion, and there's lots of pros and cons with each. There are people that absolutely love Plan 3 that will go to the end of the moons to try to explain things and run different scenarios. And at the end of the day, if you feel like you have the mindset to stay in the market when things get tough, if you're going to stay committed to the savings plans and you're going to work for a long period of time, then yeah, Plan 3 could potentially produce you more income. But if you want the safe, steady route where it's hands off, there's not really much you can mess up on, Plan 2 is going to be the way to go. And if you just took any extra money and put it into something like a 403b, deferred compensation plan, Roth IRA, something like that, you're going to end up with what we call Plan 3 on steroids. You're going to get double their income, plus you're going to have another investment account. And if that account is Roth, that thing is going to be tax-free for you to use. So anytime something comes up, you have something to dip into on a tax-free basis to offset whatever you need to pay on. So that is probably like the ultimate setup in my opinion, based on the way the plans currently are. Now, if you want to dive deeper into this, or maybe that didn't make quite much sense to you because I kind of was reading from these comments, maybe you missed some points and it's not quite clear, I'm actually building out a free retirement planning class online right now. In order to join, I'll put the link in the description below. It's on a community called School. I'm putting together a group of people from all over Washington State to give me their input so I can design a course that's going to help you guys get educated on these benefits so you can ultimately make smarter decisions, pay less in taxes, and hopefully retire earlier. So it's all about education. So I'm building that out currently as I'm recording this. So if you guys are interested in joining that, be sure to click on that link below. Again, it's free to join. And until next time, remember that your future depends on what you do today.